how about we talk about the easy ones? We have, I'm going to guess they're relatively easy. We have two properties in Rhinecliff, both on Grinnell Street, that we're scheduled to visit next week. Both fairly small, as most houses in Rhinecliff are. One is an addition to a house, I think it's 47 Grinnell, and the other is a renovation to a house at 15 Grinnell. Since I'm involved with the 15 Grinnell, I obviously will recuse myself from any committee deliberations on that one, but I will be there simply to show you the property, whoever turns up. But I would suppose that neither of those is particularly controversial, but since we haven't seen them yet, we really can't offer comments on them today. But my sense is that unlike some of the other ones we looked at recently, these are fairly simple projects. The one on Württemberg Road, which we looked at materials submitted back in February, I believe, and we had a first round of comments from our committee. Those comments were shared with the planning board, is my understanding. I don't know if they went to all members of the planning board, but certainly the chair and vice chair or co-chair, whatever they have reviewed them. And but that was pursuant to a pre-application meeting that the applicants had with the planning board representatives. Now this application has actually been submitted to the planning board as a full application, and my review of the materials submitted suggested nothing had changed from their pre-application meeting with the planning board. So I don't know that comments have necessarily changed, but we might have more of them. And we do have a site visit scheduled there this week on Wednesday.
Warren,
Yes.
do you know whether the file has any changes in it? When I went in to Google Drive and tried to download that massive file, I couldn't download it, I couldn't open it. So I'm not aware whether there are any changes to the plan. I can see the map where they're still showing moving the buildings.
Yes, yeah.
But if it's the same, I can just access the old one. If it's different, I mean, obviously the archaeology is a different part of it, but and I have seen the archaeological report, but it's kind of awkward when it's such a big file. And
yeah, you know, so I had the same problem. The submission that was sent via Google Drive is an enormous number of megabytes and would take a very long time to download. But I happened to be present for the Zoom planning board meeting when the applicants representative discussed the project, and the project as described and as illustrated for the planning board appeared to be unchanged from what we saw a few months ago. So they may have submitted some additional information. I think they did, and it might include archaeology, so it is worth specifically asking about that. But the file size was really too big to be useful, and sometimes people neglect to reduce their PDF file size, which is a pretty simple process. But regardless, we can ask the planning board to break it up in some way that we can actually look at it. And I do think it would pay you to look at the archaeology to see if anything new has been submitted for that.
Yeah, I think the report I saw before was phase 1A and 1B, and they did not have any recommendations for phases 2 and 3. So if there hasn't been any change to that, then that's probably all there is, but it'd be a good idea to know.
Yes, it would be. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And just one thing about the Grinnell Street ones, I will not be able to attend that site visit next week, but I did send my comments about archaeology out. I think I copied everybody, and as far as I'm concerned, there's no need for archaeology for either project. So I can't go on the site visit, but you've got my comments.
Yes, I did see those. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to say about the 531 Württemberg Road project at this point?
Catherine just joined us. She's
not
on audio yet.
All right.
Yeah, I had some comments.
Yes, Nancy, I saw that you sent it to a couple of people, not the whole committee.
Yes.
And that got passed on to me. There were some aspects to that were a little troubling. You mentioned your daughter, who sounded very qualified in historic preservation based on her background, but she's not actually a member or official consultant to our committee. So while it's fine that you and your daughter went and looked at the property, it seemed questionable to cite your daughter as a reference, weighing in an opinion on this particular project, because that's
Yeah,
really not the role of
My
anyone.
opinion was influenced by what she had to say and what her background is.
I understand that, and that's fine. But again, just to keep a sort of a protocol, we as a committee need to put our heads together and speak with one voice on these applications. And when you, as town historian, give an opinion, again with knowledgeable advice perhaps about something, I think it sort of has you going off on your own track. And we need to be careful not to do that. We all have to speak as a group, as a
Yeah,
committee.
I
Right?
meant
Yeah.
to give it to Kathy and to you so that you would have that background. And
Right.
isn't it true that the front facade of the historic building is not going to be impacted?
Well, I think from what we know, there may not be any significant changes to the front facade, but we had circulated previously, and I think as part of the application, there are the National Register nominations for the property, and those documents make it pretty clear that the importance of this farm is not simply the front facade of the existing main farmhouse, but it's the entire collection of farm buildings to the extent that they still exist. We know the Dutch barn came down on the other side of the road, so that part of the farm complex is gone.
Yes.
But the description of the property in the National Register listing is pretty clear that it's maybe the most intact surviving farm property in the town, with the cluster of outbuildings as part of it. It really transcends simply the building itself, the original main farmhouse. And I think it's very important to bear that in mind, because what's being proposed here is basically moving and reconfiguring every building on that property. So the fact that maybe the front facade may not change, with the exception of the little loop driveway they want to put in, seems to me kind of a very misleading way of considering the property, because what they're really proposing to do is to change everything. And I think that's troubling, as the comments we put together in February indicated.
It's pretty upsetting to see how large the additions are on the historic building. But it is a consideration that they are putting it to the back, or offsetting it, and also that they are not making anything higher than the original building.
That's certainly one argument that they could use in their favor. My sense was the rambling one-story addition looked like a motel tacked onto the back of a farmhouse. However nicely it was detailed, and it doesn't seem at all sympathetic to the character of the building or the property.
I would also add, Warren, to what you're saying, that this happens to be a corner property, and therefore it is not the front. It is got two views to the public right of way, and the side view is, as Warren said, very tough. It's like a motel. The massing is totally different to the house, and it overwhelms the house in terms of footprint. I mean, the house almost becomes an afterthought. There are numerous other reasons to be concerned, particularly in terms of citing the piece on moving historic buildings that the Department of Interior have written. It says properties listed in the National Register should be moved only when there's no feasible alternative for preservation. When a property is moved, every effort should be made to reestablish its historic orientation, immediate setting, and general environment. They've just moved them, added to them, doubled them, etc. And so I think that their spirit of just moving these things is reason enough, in conjunction, as Warren said, with the fact that the structures are listed particularly pointed out in the nomination that that we should oppose this.
Marty, did you take a look at the planning board's zoning regulations about moving buildings too?
I did, and you know, that is troublesome. And the reason it's troublesome, and I'm really glad that Charles Birnbaum is up this week, because it is always an ongoing process. And the fact is that the ordinance does not affect fences, walls, etc. And that makes our position slightly weaker. However, I had sent to everyone a week or so ago a thing about farmsteads and agricultural properties that was prepared by the state of Pennsylvania, and it happens to be particularly exemplary for that building type. And I think that it's important that we have a dialogue with the township and saying, you can't dispense any element, particularly when you're talking about, the ordinance was written before cultural landscape came into vernacular. There has been such a change in terms of context to historic buildings that one has to look at it holistically, and particularly in the case of an agricultural landscape, because if we lose those features, everything special about Wartenberg Road is gone. It becomes another series of subdivisions. It is a particular type of agricultural landscape that is so important there. And it has to do with building setbacks, stone walls, windbreaks, field patterns, etc. And I think we have to bring the township up to speed on that in the planning board.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Marty. The other thing that I noted in the applicant's presentation at the planning board is he described that all of the barns will be carefully restored and will remain on the property. The disingenuous aspect of that is they remain on the property, but that doesn't mean they aren't moved, because they're planning on moving all of them. And the reference to carefully restored doesn't seem to be what they're showing in their drawings, where they're filling the main barn with a lot of windows and changing the siding. And everything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Definitely.
So I guess my concerns about this project remain pretty much what they were a couple of months ago. But we may need to amplify or revisit, just to clarify, concerns and intent. And what I can do is circulate those notes that I had put together in February, and people can tell me what else they'd like to see in there or something they want changed. But I think this is very important for another reason, and Marty hasn't touched on it yet, but we know that there's some talk about possibly this, because Nancy gave us a presentation on it, nominating a Württemberg Road Historic District. And this farm, in many respects, becomes the linchpin, not simply of the southern end of it, but because it is such an intact historic farm. Most of the others have been chopped up or reconfigured. And I think this is really an important property for the town, as well as, for anyone living there.
I would further add to that my experience with various chapeaux of walking proposed district sites is they want meat in it, particularly when it's vernacular stuff. And I think that without this site, I think that the whole historic district is at risk, because this is the most exemplary intact of the lot of them in terms of the spaces behind the buildings and the ensemble. The rest of the site along that road are bits and pieces. So there's a really much bigger thing here for us to consider than the house alone.
In the nomination for the historic preservation,
Yes,
Yeah.
the multiple resources nomination.
but Yes, it says the federal style is one of the least frequently appearing in the Rhinebeck nomination area. And this is certainly one of the most, if not the most substantial example of its style considered
Yes.
in this survey.
Yes. That's correct. Yeah. Other thoughts from other members about this application?
Well, I'm not an architect, but I'm concerned about they're moving the buildings around. I mean, I agree completely with what Marty has had to say about it, and I am concerned about having worked on National Register nominations in the past, I am concerned about the status of that because it could lose that status, which would threaten certainly the historic district. I just don't know how much power the planning board has to stop something like this. Can you
I,
speak to that?
can I interrupt a moment, Ann? I'm sorry. I have the nomination in front of me. And I will say under related outbuildings and property, and this is part of the historic record, marked are barn, carriage house, landscape features. It notes stone walls, it notes machine shed, well house, and summer kitchen. And it then says A, B, I, and J are contributing. So this is not, these aren't just outbuildings, okay? This is contributing, okay? This is a tremendous diminution of the resource.
Well, I think another thing we can lean on is that they aren't just moving the building, they are planning to alter it considerably. The
That
one
is
that's going to
correct.
make into a residence, from the other, they're putting many windows in it.
Right, that's right. Anne, to your point, which was a very good one and something planning boards always wrestle with, the planning board can express concerns to the applicants and ask them to look at alternatives or offer alternatives. Ultimately, as you know, a National Register listing is no protection
Right.
for a property unless, you know, the town has a law, and the town has a demolition law of sorts, but it you know, generally it's considered that people can do what they want with their property. So it's a matter of negotiating with them and trying to show that what they're doing would severely diminish the historic character of the structure and encourage them to take another look in such a way that they can come up with a proposal that doesn't end up moving and altering all of the structures as they are currently proposed.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies it.
Okay. And anything else on this project? Okay, I'm not aware of other current referrals before us, other than the two we mentioned on Grinnell, which we're gonna have the opportunity to see next week. But there's an item here on website development, and I know I think Marty pointed out that our website doesn't have a lot of information, and we talked about linking reference material useful for applicants to you know, not only to find the town forms, but also to find, say, National Register guides on how to, you know, treat historic properties. And we talked about that, and I think some of the old material has been taken down, or maybe the site is offline at the moment.
It is
It's offline.
offline at this point, and the reason it's offline is several of the things that I had passed along to the committee as examples of what we might strive for landed up being posted online with no explanation as why they are there. So when you read about a district in New Jersey, which I thought was exemplary, but without pointing out that it's exemplary, it seems absolutely inappropriate.
Right, right.
So what I had started to do is to start, I believe I'm going to be working with Mr. Rosenberg, who did the original one. And I started to do an outline which just had our name and says that we were created by the town board by local law number 4 in 2019. And our mission statement, which is to assist, review, and make recommendations to the town planning board on historical and archaeological regulations and protections for important and distinctive resources of Rhinebeck's past. And I found that very interesting that that is the ordinance, because it talks about important and distinctive. And I think that that gives us a tooth or a grasp into properties like Wurtemberg Road that are beyond. I mean, they actually gave us a little bit of a gift there by saying it's distinctive. And so I think that that's quite valuable. I describe ourselves as the members of the committee are a multidisciplinary team committed to building upon the past and ongoing efforts of the community and governmental preservation efforts. And then we list our two co-chairs, our two distinguished co-chairs and our members. And then what we wanted to do, and I'm open to suggestion on this, is we're going to do useful links and resources. And Nancy, you'd be particularly helpful on this, because the first thing I came up with is that very nice few page thing, Town of Rhinebeck, discover the history of your Rhinebeck house, that you did a few years ago. And I think that, you know, it was interesting that I tripped upon it, and every other township that I went to that has done what we are trying to do has that sort of thing first and foremost, because it's nice, it's easy to understand, and it's generic. So I thought we would open with that. And then I wanted to have several of the different sites and maps that people could look at, so that people could begin to find themselves around. And so I had your Discover History, the Rhinebeck Multiple Resource Area nomination, maybe Star Library, Rhinebeck Historical, or anything else that you can think of. And then the 2-3 maps that we had, so that people understand that they have to do a little bit of homework on their own before they present. Because my hope is that we are going to be doing an intake form, but the intake form has to tell people how to fill it out. So the intake form should refer to our website, and people should be responsible for checking out these resources before they file. So if anyone has even any archaeology resources that you might have, Anne?
I did give Kathy some initially, you know, the whole New York State phases and the DOT outlines and so on. Those were linked on the website. So you probably have access to those. But that's important for somebody who has to do archaeological stuff to understand the difference in the phases and what is required, and that there's a protocol for it. You know, you don't just go out and do some digging. You have to follow the New York State procedures for it. And I think that would make it clearer for landowners to understand where we're coming from as far as what needs to be done.
Maybe you could help. I'll get that from Kathy, because that should certainly be there. And
she had put it up on the site. She had put some of that up, but
right.
yeah,
I'm sure
if you need it, let me know.
Great. What about just in terms of, again, it's what's required and it's what's of interest, because the other part of what we're trying to do is educational. And, you know, it's interesting if people are planning an addition on their house, was there a privy pit nearby? Was there a well nearby?
Mhm.
Are there any things that we can be telling people that are of interest that might be overlooked, or does that come up at the time of our site visits to these properties?
I'll think about it and see what I can come up with. I mean, most of what comes off the top of my head is pretty technical, and that's not going to be of interest to the average landowner, but I'll see what I can come up with. SHA may have some, public kinds of, publications, that kind of introducing historical archaeology to the general public, that we could link in.
That would be great.
One thing that I've been upset about is when they make an application, there's a lot of times when they're checking that it's not a historic building. And they should be able to refer to the,
We lost you.
Nancy, you're muted. There we go.
okay. I don't know, my computer is going crazy, shutting me off, and so that was one thing I wanted to say. Another thing is I would like to review that brochure, because I did it a number of years ago, and probably some of the website addresses have changed.
Undoubtedly. Right.
Interesting.
That
would be great.
How do you all feel about the teal maps? Are you aware of the collection of early maps?
I think those are invaluable. I think the multiple resource is invaluable. Anything we can give people and tell them to go and look is helpful, because these people are blind. They're not going to hire a historian to do it, and the town isn't going to make them to do it. And it would be nice for these people to learn something about what they're sitting on.
Very good.
So I think you just tempt curiosity. I think that what would help on these links, if we could, is a little summary under each thing of why it is useful. Town of Rhinebeck Discover History, a layman's guide to whatever, or what the MRA is about, or whatever, again, gives to the person who might be willing to read a little sentence, might pique their interest.
Sounds good.
Anything to pique interest. So anything that anyone would like up here as a resource to their particular area of expertise, or something they've tripped on again elsewhere they find useful. Remember, we're educational, and the more we can do to educate the population. It really seemed, Nancy, when I looked into things, that there was a very early move with the Historical Society to interest people and educate them, and then it seemed to fall off precipitously. And I don't know if there wasn't the right response to it or what, but we've talked about workshops and stuff, and perhaps we're at a different time now where people might be a bit more sensitive to this stuff, and maybe it's time to reintroduce some of it.
Okay.
It's very interesting you just said that, Marty. One thing that, we've all gotten tired of Zoom meetings, but looking toward, more current technology, it's something we could consider is putting together some YouTube videos that could basically have someone describing how you go about doing some basic research on your property and the resources available. The Consortium of Rhinebeck History has an awful lot of stuff online. I'd say Rhinebeck is ahead of many communities in terms of having material and a lot of it online. But talking people through might actually be an alternative to simply reading steps or a brochure or something.
I think both would be very helpful, Warren, because as you know, on some guides in equal access things, they will actually say to people, how do you learn best? Some
Sure.
people absorb best by reading, some people absorb best verbally or
Right.
graphically or whatever.
Correct. Yeah.
What about putting a link to the historic tax credit program? Because people might not
I
know
think
that
that's
they
an-
would get a credit, and
that's
that might incentivize them too.
It's an excellent idea because it's also reason to have, that's excellent. It's also reason to have your property designated.
Mhm. Right.
Very good.
Anything else on the website that anybody wants to offer comment on or suggestions? Okay, we're trying to move on a lot of fronts here. The next item on the agenda is an update. We touched on this earlier, but an update on the Württemberg Road Historic Designation. And I believe there's going to be a meeting with County Historian Will Tatum and Marty, and who else, Marty?
Well, I know Kathleen is going to be there. Melody is going to be there.
Melody Moore, okay.
Yeah, and the idea was, first of all, I have met with Melody once. We have not met the three of us together. But the other thing that is most unusual is that Charles Birnbaum is going to be up.
Right.
And obviously, the town has made use of his expertise repeatedly, and he is invaluable in making our point about a cultural landscape. In fact, the reason why National Register and cultural landscapes are not merged as one is one that puzzles me, but we're not going to change the world, or certainly our government. But he is the essence of why the setting is everything. There is not a building at 531 that is well, excuse me, Nancy corrected me on that, is that the house is very distinguished in its quiet way. But again, as a resource to others, it's all of the buildings and the landscape. And I think that really this whole agricultural or rural landscape thing has to be revisited because it ties into our zoning as well in the township, which is not our purview. But there are some places where they have limited, I think 5 acre, is it, and 10 acre, Warren?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's done, I assume, to preserve agricultural and open space. So it all really ties back together. And the more you look at it all, the more sense it makes. So I'm hoping that Charles can give us a boost. And if he's due a report to our planning committee, that he might give them a few perks about what we're trying to do with this particular Württemberg Road site. So that's going to happen this week. And he wasn't up here for this particular purpose, but
Right.
Kathy seems to have great skill in commandeering people when they happen to be in the neighborhood. I think she sets traps or something like that. So
Is he going on Wednesday to the walkthrough?
yes, he is.
Okay.
Or at least I've been told he's going to be there.
Yeah, I think that's the plan right now. Mhm.
So
Okay.
it's going to be particularly interesting. And Catherine, I say this to you and to Warren. I think it's very important to architects, and I speak only for myself in being blind, of having someone with Charles's expertise open our eyes to how much more there is there than the house, and that we start looking at these sites differently. And I'm a prime offender. So that's
Okay.
where we are on the website. I'll take all suggestions. Everyone has my email. I think the more we give people, the more we justify the faith that the town is putting us to build this aspect of this underserved aspect of our community.
That is very true. Okay, we're now at the point on the agenda where we're open for any other business. Nancy, do you have anything that you wanted to say that you haven't touched on yet?
No, I'm glad that we've been able to discuss these things.
Super. Catherine?
No, thank you.
Ann?
I'm good, thanks.
Marty?
Yeah, I just do want to say something to our committee as a whole, because I think it's very important. And I sat down with Melody in preparation for this this meeting that she and Will Tatum and I are going to have. And this is a pat on the back to everyone on our committee, because she was saying how impressed she was. I told her I think we have a really terrific committee, and I've really enjoyed getting to know people a little bit and become more integrated. And she was commenting of how successful, how balanced we are in terms of talents, and how far we've come up to speed under adverse circumstances in terms of leaning on each other and mutual respect and sharing information. And I was just telling her that I really couldn't be happier that Warren asked me to join, and all that I have benefited from it. And she said everyone is sort of marveling how we really stepped into this thing and how quickly we've come to speed. And I'm glad that the town is acknowledging that, because we're putting in a lot of work and a lot of time. And I think it's good that we have that respect. So as being well organized, together, united, respectful, etc. So compliments to everyone from Melody on how nicely we're doing. I'm sure it's because of Will and Kathy's, Warren and Kathy's leadership, but keeping me in line. But it's all good. And I think we have some great things ahead.
So with that, I see that my co-chair has joined us.
Hello.
In time for, in pardon for parting remarks. Closing
Cocktails, cocktails.
I did finally get Charles Birnbaum and Nord delivered to John Habak's, even though can you believe this? I got lost getting there. Seriously, I did. It just was unbelievable. So I hope they'll look past that when they meet you guys on Wednesday, who are much more talented and competent than I am.
So Kathy, is Charles Birnbaum joining us at the site visit at 531 Württemberg Road, or was it?
He is. And I've told the guys at Art of Building that this sort of saves them some lost time, because he would have been invited by the planning board. And I cleared it with Melody and Michael before. He would have been invited to make a visit there anyway. So it's fortuitous, and he's been given the application and he has studied it some. So for those of you who have not met Charles, he will be there on Wednesday. And I think he'll be a big help in what is a difficult and tricky situation.
Nancy, would it be appropriate, and he's literally the authority on this stuff, but would it be appropriate for you to send him that Pennsylvania piece that I had distributed to our committee of all the components of a agricultural landscape? I'm sure that it's old news to him. He probably contributed to it, but I mean, these are the things that I would like him to cite in any feedback he gives to sort of bolster our claim of the total instead of just saving the house.
Or who was that directed at, Marty?
I was directed at Kathy whether she felt it appropriate to, the agricultural district or an agricultural context is a particular type of cultural landscape.
Mhm.
And I just felt that this Pennsylvania piece, and it's not because I'm from Pennsylvania, it's because they have no less than 30 items on the checklist that pertain to an agricultural landscape. And I was reading down the thing and saying, got that, got that, got that, got that. And I feel it's very, very important that we cite just how intact this property is.
So Marty, why don't I just simply, if I haven't already, forward on Charles's email to you,
Yeah.
you by way of introduction,
Okay.
share that document with you and.
Yes, that will be fine.
Okay, so I'll do that and that'll take care of that particular issue. And Nancy, I haven't shared with Charles sorry, guys, your outline or your PowerPoint with regard to Wurtemberg Road.
Yeah.
So that might be worth doing also, unless you object.
No, that would be fine if you have it.
Okay. I don't know why my husband can't answer the phone. Truly. Anyway, okay, so I'll orchestrate both of those things.
Very good. Anything else?
Did you miss me when I was gone?
We did.
A
We
lot.
did.
Your ears
You got-
must have been burning.
Okay, I'm so sorry about
Right.
this.
We'll take a motion to adjourn then.
I so moved.
Second,
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
I
Hi.
Thank you.